All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's event, Fiction as Social Commentary. Today, we will hear from Mo Conlan reading from The Lost Books, Romance and Adventure in Tudor Times, released May 17th, 2023. David A. Collier reading from Earth's Ecocide, Desperation 2647, released June 13th, 2023, and Margarita Barresi reading from A Delicate Marriage, releasing October 10th, 2023. All three authors can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. At the end of today's event, we will have time for audience questions. So during the reading, if you have a question for our authors, go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. And then during the reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can certainly always feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. And one last note, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Mo, David, and Margarita today. Let's start off with our first reader, who is Mo Conlan. Mo began her career as a writer when she became a story gobbler at an early age. She began reading through the entire children's section of the local library. She worked for more than 30 years as a journalist, wearing various hats on her hometown daily newspaper: reporter, copy editor, columnist, books editor, and features editor. Since leaving newspaper work, Mo has been writing poetry and fiction and editing books. She won honorable mention in this year's Writer's Digest contest for her personal essay, The Impatient Patient. She also is an artist and was recently featured artist in the Poetry East magazine. Today, we'll be hearing Mo read from The Lost Books, a humorous and even feminist take on Tudor-era class structures. In The Lost Books, Squire Henry Truelove of Cornwall has a simple ambition: to win the hand of his reluctant ladylove, Morwenna. But life takes a bad turn for the squire when his family's estate faces ruinous taxation. Truelove and his friends form a band of holy pirates to bring down the corrupt taxman and to rescue the precious lost books. With that, let's hear from the book now from Mo.
Thank you. I'm going to just start at the beginning, read chapter 1. And I have given my chapters titles. I always liked that when I was reading a book, giving a title. So chapter 1 is called The Overgenerous Suitor. When the large parcel arrived, Morwenna Goodwin was busy in the barn helping Da repair the sheep pen. She heard a commotion and ran to the front of their cottage, adjusting her kirtle and cap as she ran. This was a fine winter day in North Cornwall, a blessing amidst so many killing freezes that battered England in this reign of the Tudors. On the doorstep, Morwenna found a pear tree. In its branches sat a fat partridge, giving her a rather cheeky look. A scroll at the base of the tree read, "I would wed ye, dear heart, H. Truelove." Well, isn't that just like him, she thought. Henry Truelove must think I am going to cook up this partridge into a pie for him and make him a pear posset. Ha! The pear tree would be planted as weather permitted in the small orchard at the back of the farm. For now it would stay in the barn, and that beady-eyed partridge was getting a mate. So to have partridge eggs and succulent hatchlings to roast on feast days. Henry Truelove had first asked Morwenna to marry him when she was 10 and he was 11. They were playing in the woods, climbing trees, and hunting for mushrooms. "Ye are my fair maid with the golden hair," he told her. Will you marry me? Don't be daft. I be but 10, and nay wish to be a wife, she told him. I will ask again when ye be of wife age. Morwenna was now of wife age and had turned down Henry's proposals many times. She liked Henry well enough, but he was a bit of a doolally with his poems and songs and romantic fancies. He is taking advantage of Christmastide to woo me again, she thought. The Truelove family had come up in the world since Henry and Morwenna were children. Henry now had a place at court. He should marry a fancy court lady who rouges her lips, Morwenna thought. She had no taste for court, with such going on as could barely be mentioned. She did not wish to spend her days trussed up in corsets, ruffs, and farthingales, straining her eyes over needlework, and fending off assaults to her maidenhood. Morwenna did like to dance, though, and court was a great place for dancing, she mused, and then dismissed the notion. Daft, she thought, grown men with nothing better to do than dance around like peacocks in gaudy doublets and plumed hats. Morwenna had actual work to do. The Goodwins had a small freehold farm outside the village of Gwyn, but not much coin with which to hire on workers. With no sons and Morwenna being the only child to survive infancy, she was the one to help with the haying and lambing and being smart with sums to keep track of the farm's small income. Though being only a girl, she was much admired by her ma and da for the many tasks she performed so well. Morwenna saw a village lad about and offered him a penny to deliver a message to Henry Truelove, which she labored over, having learned only rudimentary writing skills. Busy I be with mucking and spinning, and nay wish to be wed, M. The day after Christmas, Morwenna found another gift at her door. 2 turtle doves, and another partridge, and another pear tree. She built a little hutch for the 2 partridges to nest in, and another for the turtle doves. Well a day, she thought, knowing that partridges and turtle doves mate for life, and so represent true love. He is ladling the honey on thick, this lad. Morwenna planted the 2nd pear tree in a barrel in the barn. In spring, she would move the trees to the small orchard and back. She sent no letter to Henry. My first writ should put him in mind of my true mind, she thought. No. I'm going to skip ahead then to chapter 16. And this also involves Henry and Morwenna. By this time, they have become friends and holy pirates together in search of the treasure, the holy books lost when the monasteries and convents were seized by Henry VIII. But she's still not of a mind to marry him, but they've become friends now. He's come home from court, so here goes. Chapter 16, Henry plays a trick. Henry and Morwenna took a hidden path, going deeper into the wood. Look yon, said Henry, there be the great oak we would climb. Ahead of them rose a majestic oak, so high and wide that as children they had dubbed it the king tree. Do you recollect, Henry, that we believed if we climbed it, we might reach heaven and knock on God's door to give obeisance and ask for blessings? Henry laughed. We were daft lambkins. We never climbed higher than halfway. Can ye yet climb, Sir Henry, being such a fine sir now, gone to court? Morwenna teased. Ha, be assured, lady, I yet be fit to climb. And what of ye? Be ye now too dainty a young lady to climb a tree? Nay, Morwenna said, I be strong from farm chores. Oh, but what of ye? Not but dancing and such. Ye may lose your dainty footing in yon tree. Henry shook his head. Nay, lady, life in the palace hath given me limbs good practice. Merely to arrive at the dining chamber, the palace be like a city to trot, and there be tennis. Henry went first, took a run at the tree trunk, and sprang onto the lowest limb. He then proffered his hand to lift Morwenna up. She bunched her skirts up to her waist, though keeping a seemly amount of her legs covered. They climbed up limb by limb until they came upon a conjugation of branches that made a little nest for sitting. Morwenna looked out at the land below. She was giddy with the thrill of being so high up and looking out to see the forests and fields and small streams below. Like birds we be. Look yon, Henry, I espy the fox den, where we played at being pirates. Aye, it be our hidey hole, he said. Could but fit one of we at a time. Until we carried out buckets of mud and clay to widen it, do you recollect? Aye, said Henry. We be full of cheer then, and not of present woes. Morwenna prepared to climb down. I would see that cave again. She climbed to the ground, Henry climbing down above her. She was a few feet from earth when, of a sudden, he began to fall. Morwenna threw out her arms to catch him. He landed atop her, and both tumbled down in a heap. Morwenna untangled herself, her heart thumping wildly. Henry lay unmoving. She laid her ear to his chest. Oh, Henry, sweetling, say ye yet live. She brought her mouth close to his, recalling what her ma had told her. When a newborn cannot breathe, nurse may breathe into its mouth, giving the breath of life with her own. Morwenna put her mouth to Henry's. Their lips touched. What if it be a sin to kiss so, she worried. Such an odd sensation, yet not unpleasant. Whereupon, Henry popped upright and laughed. Aha, ye hath called me sweetling, and hath kissed me. Now you must wed me. Morwenna gasped at Henry's miraculous recovery at her kiss. Then, looking at his triumphantly smiling face, shouted, Ye be a knave, a mendacious varlet, a vile poltroon to trick me so. I would sooner be wed to meet pig, Henry, true love. You know, shall I go on, or I've done 2 chapters? I'm not sure.
You've got a little bit of time, so we'd love to hear a bit more.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of sticking with those 2. There's much more to the book, but it'll be a thread to hang on to. So this one's chapter 19, and it's called Henry Confronts Godfrey. Godfrey's a villain, and he has tried to woo Morwenna and has been refused, and he's a varlet. Henry vowed to get back into the good graces of Morwenna. The day was gray and spitting snow when he set off on foot to visit the village woodcarver's shop. There he planned to purchase a bauble to sweeten her. Along the path, walking away from town, he encountered Godfrey Blount. Blount was red in the face and treading carefully, which told Henry that he had been indulging in strong drink at the pub. Though he had naught but scorn for the knave, Henry greeted Godfrey with formal mannerliness. Good day to ye, sir. Well a day, true love. Come from visiting that Goodwin wench she just put on airs above herself? Blount slurred in reply. This fast put Henry on the boil. Sirrah, do not speak of Mistress Morwenna. Ye be attired above your station in velvet doublet and hat with a foolish long plume. That, in truth, be airs. Blount's face turned yet redder. His hand went to his side as if to draw a weapon, but paused when he felt he had none. What mean ye say above me station? He demanded. Sirrah, if ye dress so in the city, ye would be fined. Ye nay be noble, nay ignoble. Ye be nay lord nor squire. Ye nay even be stout English yeoman. Your estate, sir, be taxman, and ye better be better attired in rodent pelt and rat's tail than the marten fur that lines your cloak. Morwenna Sarah be a lady of good stock, uncommon good sense, and great virtue. Henry had uttered fighting words, but Blount was too drunk to fight. Red in the face and waving his hands, he shouted, "Step aside, true love. I would pass by. I will keep to mind your malicious speech against my person this day." Later, Henry arrived at Goodwin Farm carrying a package wrapped in paper and string. He found Morwenna in the kitchen preparing a pottage for the evening meal. "Good evening, Mistress Morwenna, and God keep ye." She turned a face to him that bore no smile. Henry essayed his most engaging grin, the one that could capture the eyes of court ladies. "I have come to beg your forgiveness for my egregious bad behavior in the wood," he said, "and I have for ye a gift, a sign of my true contrition." Henry unwrapped and proffered the gift, revealing Morwenna knew not what. Atop a wooden disc the size of a dinner plate sat 9 tiny figurines of richly attired ladies. When Henry wound a handle at the side, the figures moved in a courtly dance. "It be like magic," Morwenna exclaimed. "Nay, magic," said Henry. "Cogs." He showed her the underside of the toy, where tiny wheels interlocked like teeth and moved as the handle turned to propel the tiny dancers. "Oh, Henry, this be rare and beautiful," Morwenna said, now smiling. "But nay spend coin on such, when coin be spare," she admonished. "Sweet Morwenna, we shall find the monk's treasures. I feel a portent. Then I shall buy ye all the toys ye desire." Morwenna accepted the gift, and by doing so forgave Henry. She entreated him to sit while she hurried to show her pretty toy to the others in the household. Henry was best pleased. Though he had falsely boasted of a portent, he thought, "Now I am vowed and pledged to find the monk's treasure."
Thank you so much, Mo. I love that we got a taste of the wordplay and the humor in this book. It just gives such a good promise of so much more to come once you get deeper in the pages.
Thank you. It's
Yeah,
fun.
of course. So, reading next today is David A. Collier. David earned his PhD from The Ohio State University. For 41 years, he taught all levels of students as well as participants in executive programs within the business schools of Duke University, the University of Virginia, the Ohio State University, Florida Gulf Coast University, and the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. His research has attracted over 37,000 reads and 4,000 citations. After decades of authoring award-winning research articles, business cases, and 5 college textbooks, he wanted a new challenge, writing novels that make a difference. David is the author of a science fiction series. Visit www.theentity.us, Earth's Ecocide, as well as Romance in My Rambler using the pen name David A. Bourbon. Today we'll be hearing from Earth's Ecocide, Desperation 2647. The Earth's Ecocide science fiction novel series is a 1,000-year story of humanity struggling to cope with climate destruction and the awakening of artificial intelligence. What will life be like if global average temperatures increase 2, 4, or 8 degrees Celsius? What will life be like if sea levels increase 1, 10, or 70 meters? What if both happen? We'll find out more now from David.
Thank you so much. And I noticed you used the word "the Ohio State University," so I appreciate that.
Yeah, my blood boiled a little bit as a University of Michigan grad, but I have
Oh
to do
my
what I have to
goodness.
do.
Well, we can't talk to each other. No, Michigan's a great school. I was a business school professor, and I will tell you, Michigan is a wonderful school. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate people listening in. After I retired from the universities, I had a great passion for our planet. My hobby has been astronomy and things of that nature, and I just have unbelievable interest in trying to help. Maybe I'm one of a billion people that are trying to help the planet and the Earth's biosphere survive. And if the Earth's biosphere doesn't survive, humanity will not survive. So I wrote a 4-series novel series. And the first novel is 2147. And that's when the temperatures increased about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, and the sea level has risen 1 meter. The second novel, which is the one that I'm getting ready to read, is Desperation 2647, and now the ocean has risen 7 or 8 meters. This is 500 years from now. And the coastline of Florida, for example, is Lakeland, Florida. The southern half of Florida is gone, including, if you think about 7 or 8 meters of sea level rise, many of our major cities around the world. The third novel, which I'm just about finished with, is titled Earth's Ecocide Extinction. And in that case, the temperatures outside are 130, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And the only humans in North America who are alive are living in caves. And then I have a fourth novel, which sort of has a surprise to it, which I've done the first draft of that. So just like Mo, let me please start with, I just said start with chapter 1 in the very beginning. So the chapter 1 is titled Heat. Wear your cooling vest. It's 118 degrees Fahrenheit, Dr. Bella Paris said to her 17-year-old daughter, Livia. Livia sat down in a shared self-driving vehicle on a late Tuesday afternoon, June the 1st, 2647, in her hometown of Lakeland, Florida. No individual or family owned their own transportation vehicles. Only companies and governments owned or shared vehicles. Livia told the obedient vehicle to take her to a high school swimming practice and play the violin music, an epic story. Livia played the violin at home and used the music to motivate herself for the grueling practice. The vehicle hovered about 1 meter above the pavement and moved down the street with Livia's head bobbing to the music. Oh, how she loved the violin. As the vehicle made the turn 200 meters from her house, Livia heard a thumping sound on the roof. The thumps became loud bangs and drowned out the music. Turn off the music, Livia commanded as unknown projectiles crashed into the vehicle. The shell of the vehicle wailed in pain in the constant pounding. She ordered the car to stop, and it did. The deafening rumble of the thundering sound dominated her surroundings. She looked through the vehicle's windshield to see a bird smash into it and crack the safety glass. The crack meandered down the windshield. Livia's confusion went from alarm to fear as blood and bird guts slid down the windshield. Her arms stiffened and she wanted to flee the vehicle. But once she looked out the window, she watched as dozens of birds hit the vehicle and piled on the road. After a minute, the thumping sound diminished until there was only silence. Livia watched in horror as thousands of dying birds gasped for air. She fought for life as they fought for life as they tried to stand up with broken bodies. Soon they realized their fate and stopped breathing. "Oh my God, what is happening?" a crying Livia shouted to herself. The youthful Livia had never witnessed a living creature fight for life and die. She was in shock. With blood running down his forearm and arms, an elderly neighbor stumbled to her passenger door and knocked on the window. "Are you okay? Roll down the window," Livia said to the autonomous driving vehicle. As the window descended, dead birds stuck to the window fell to the ground, and one fell in her lap. It twisted for a second and then quit moving. With the window open, Livia could smell the blood and the metallic sulfur odor. Livia looked up and down the street. The carnage filled the area. Birds covered roofs, sidewalks, and hung from trees. "Yes, I'm fine," she said to the man. "What killed them?" "It's the heat. The birds are finches," the Asian man said. His own blood dripped down his face and onto the street. Livia growled, pushing hard to open her dented car door, which opened with a loud squeaking sound. She tried not to step on the carcasses, but it was impossible. She heard the crunching of bones as she tried to reach the man. Dying birds wiggled under her feet. The reality of life in 2647 confronted her. Neither her mother nor the haven of her cozy home could protect her from the torrid temperatures and violent weather. "What's your name?" Livia asked. "I'm Jed Dijon. Did the birds hit you?" "Yes," he said in an anxious voice. He pressed a blood-soaked handkerchief on his head. "Is anyone at your house?" "No." "Let's go to mine. We're only 2 blocks away. We'll tend to those wounds." They both knocked away the pile of dead birds that lay on Livia's vehicle. Blood stained their hands and clothes as they climbed into the vehicle. "Please take us home," Livia ordered the vehicle as sweat streamed down their faces. The dead birds were baking in the intense heat, and so were they. They couldn't see well out the bloody and fractured car windows, but the driverless car used dozens of sensors and cameras, its anti-gravity drives raising it 1 meter above the gore of the street. "Mom, Neela, help us," Livia yelled as she and Mr. Dijon hurried into Livia's home. Neela, the family home service robot, was self-aware and had limited human-like emotions. Her 2.5-meter tall humanoid frame was covered by an olive skin created through nanotechnology, and she had a human nose, mouth, and ears. Her face was ordinary looking by design, so notions of human beauty would not interfere with her job. Neela had straight white synthetic hair. Other colorful robot hair colors included purple, orange, yellow, and blue. Neela could see in all wavelengths, including infrared and ultraviolet light, speak all human languages, and had immediate access to all human knowledge. "What happened?" a shocked Vela called out when she saw them covered in blood. Vela was a faculty member and a world-renowned ecologist at Florida Polytechnical University. A single parent with a few wrinkles on her 61-year-old face, she had raised Livia and her son, Cutter. The athletic and stubborn Alda Paris, her beloved husband, died in a scuba accident when Livia and Cutter were young kids. "Mom, dying birds fell out of the sky. It was terrible." "Livia, are you hurt?" "No, Mom, just upset." "You two sit. Neela, bring us some wet towels." A cut and bruised Mr. Dijon sat in a kitchen chair. While the vehicle had protected Livia, Mr. Dijon was walking outside when the birds fell from the sky. "Mom, the vehicle's banged up." We'll worry about that later. Let's help Mr. Dujon. Bella cleaned Mr. Dujon's forehead, trying not to let the blood get on her brown hair. She applied an antibiotic ointment to the 4-centimeter gash and then placed a bandage tight around his head. His arms were scratched and bleeding, but no major wounds. They discussed taking him to the doctor to see about stitches for his forehead. Neela handed him 2 pills and a glass of water for his headache. Thank you. I've read of this happening before, Mr. Dujon said. Yes, birds have no sweat glands, so the fierce temperatures kill them when they're flying, Vela said. Last week, over 6,000 sparrows fell from the sky in Alca, Chile. Those birds weigh an average of 50.04 grams each. Falling from 40 meters, they hit the ground at 28 meters per second, or 19.6 joules of energy at impact, a calm Neela said. Livia and Bella looked at their thoughtful service robot and smiled, acknowledging her scientific facts and her composure even in emergencies. Neela hailed a vehicle. Neela, hail a vehicle and take our friend home, Bella said as she escorted him to the door. See that he's safe inside his home. Okay, I'll also take pictures of the vehicle and file an insurance claim, Neela said in a dietetic tone. A dazed Bella replied, thank you. Olivia closed the door after Neela and Mr. Dujon left and leaned up against it. Mom, I've got to call my swim coach. Then I'm going to take a shower and lie down. The next scene, I'll just read the beginning of. The next day at breakfast, birds were on everybody's mind. Neela brought Livia and Bella breakfast and said, the Lakeland Fire Department worked most of the night and cleaned up the bird disaster. They are hosing down the damaged streets and houses this morning. That's good, Livia replied. I can still smell the dead bodies. Yeah, I can too, Bella said as she drank her customized energy drink. It's in the air, even in the house. Smell serves no purpose, Neela blurted out. Bella looked at her royal service bot and said, but Neela, you miss the aroma and joy of flowers and food. Yes, but I know the structure of 18,942 odor molecules, and they give me no pleasure. Ah, can we talk about something else? You're ruining my breakfast, Bella said, sitting more erect in her chair. After a few bites of food, Livia asked, Mom, is bird extinction a suitable topic for a paper I am writing in biology class? Yes, it's a great topic, she said with a loving smile. Or should I focus on another animal? Birds are an excellent topic. We all need to cope with our hot climate. Many larger animals are extinct. The acidic ocean has killed blue whales. Arctic polar bears do not exist, but we have cloned them. Bella stopped eating and looked at Livia with troubled eyes. Livia, I study living things in my job, so I see the problems. Through my research, I'm trying to save sea creatures and coral reefs. Okay, I'll do my report on birds. Good. I'd like to read your paper when you're finished, Bella said. That's it.
Thank you so much, David. Right from the start, I mean, you really painted a picture of a future that unfortunately might not be that far off. So, I mean, really, thank you for giving us that proper sense of urgency.
Can I just make one comment?
Sure.
There used to be 12,000 bird species. Depending on the estimates and what scientists you want to read, There's only 6,000 to 8,000 species now. So we've already lost a third of the birds.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, thank you again for, being here and giving us this knowledge. And of course, more in the story can be found out at that link in the chat. So everyone should definitely be checking those out. In the meantime, our final reader for today is Margarita Barresi. Raised in Puerto Rico by her grandparents, Margarita grew up hearing stories about old days, the genesis for this, her first novel. She studied public relations at Boston University and after a successful career in marketing communications, now devotes her time to writing. Her essays have been published in several literary magazines and compilations. Margarita lives in the suburbs north of Boston with her husband and 2 Puerto Rican cats, Luna and Rico. A Delicate Marriage, the novel we'll be hearing from today, takes the reader on a vivid tour of Puerto Rico 40 years after becoming a U.S. colony, a time of great change and political turmoil on the island. Isabella, a wealthy woman, sacrifices her artistic inspirations to marry Marco, a penniless man dedicated to improving conditions on the island. As political violence threatens their paradise, Isabella and Marco's marriage develops and changes. They question whether their marriage, like the island's relationship with the U.S., should continue. Margarita, the virtual podium is yours.
Thank you so much. So I am going to read today from A Delicate Marriage. Pretty cover that Atmosphere did. And I'm actually going to read the book's prologue and epilogue because essentially it's everything that happens before and after the story. But I feel that that both these passages illustrate how the more things change, the more they often stay the same. So we will go to the prologue where we meet Marco, one of the main characters, and it is called The Hurricane, 1928. Marco Rios spotted the red flag fluttering above the police station and sprinted home giddy with anticipation. A hurricane, finally. Weaned on legendary tales of the big one, the San Ciriaco hurricane of 1899, he yearned to experience nature's full power, a typical 14-year-old living for forbidden adventure. But when he burst into his wooden house and registered Papa and Mama's somber faces, he tamped down his enthusiasm. They'd been busy securing their belongings and moving things off the floor in case of flooding. Susana, take the children to the church, Papa said, grabbing his straw hat. I'm going to get my mother. Mama paled. Have you gone completely loco, Diego? Tell me you're joking. She grabbed a basket of sewing notions, stuffed it onto an already crowded shelf, and shook her head at Papa. It'll take you hours. You won't make it there and back in time. Ay, mi amor, she's my mother. I have to go get her, Papa said. He pointed out the window. It's not even raining yet. I'll go with you, Papa, Marco said. Absolutely not. Mama clutched Marco's arm. You're staying right here. One loco in the family is enough. Marco, I need you here to take care of your mother and sister. Papa addressed him as an equal. Can you do that? Marco's chest expanded. Si, Papa. I'll protect them with my life. He held eye contact with his father for several seconds. Papa nodded, quickly kissed each of them, and headed out. Mama clenched her fists and released a grunt of frustration. She fired a few choice words under her breath before bolting back into action. She grabbed 3 blankets, a handful of guavas, and her rosary before shepherding Marco and Julia toward the town plaza, where the church bells clanged a warning. San Felipe crashed into the shores of Yabucoa before Marco's father could return. As the storm pummeled the church's cement building, those who'd taken refuge inside blocked their ears against the high-pitched howling of the brutal wind. Lips moved in silent prayer, while the humid air intensified the weighty tang of incense. Marco, Mama, and Julia huddled on a wooden pew near the white marble altar, their bones vibrating with each violent gust. Electricity crackled around them. Their arm hair stood at attention. When the building began to shake violently, Padre Palacios ordered the windows open just an inch to relieve the pressure. The storm's cacophony was more present with the windows ajar, and the lashing rain began to leak inside. Time stood still while the wind hummed, whistled, and howled, a deafening song of destruction. Marco, fully cowed, was deeply ashamed of his earlier excitement and naivete. How could Papa and Abuela survive this storm's fury without a strong shelter? San Felipe was a beast from hell. The storm raged overnight, and though Marco fought to keep his eyes open, he eventually surrendered to sleep. He woke to the smell of burnt candle wax and the sound of weeping, and pulled himself upright to see Padre Palacios holding his mother's hand, offering the usual platitude. If he's gone, my dear, it's God's will. Marco trembled uncontrollably, his mind refusing to accept the unthinkable. He sprang to his feet, darted to the back of the church, and pounded up the bell tower stairs to the town's highest vantage point. He scanned the devastated valley for a trace of his father. The countryside just yesterday, 100 shades of green, appeared denuded, as if a giant's hand had ripped out its flora. Ancient trees lay tortured on the ground, and few houses, including his own, remained standing. The vast detritus of humanity lay scattered, a black cauldron, a doll's torso, a twisted bicycle. Smashed avocados, plantains, papayas, and guavas littered the ground alongside pig, chicken, horse, and cow carcasses. The destruction was incomprehensible, yet the sky shone an incongruous bright blue, as if denying culpability. Papa, where are you? Marco's steely grip on the steeple's railing turned his knuckles white. He stayed there all day, pacing back and forth in the turret, holding vigil for his father. In the 4 long, frantic weeks that followed, neither Papa's nor Abuela's body surfaced. Marco had examined every inch of Guayanes beach, where coconut palms that once grew along the shore in majestic rows lay crisscrossed in the sand like scattered pencils. He'd scoured the flattened and flooded sugarcane fields, combed the banks of the swollen Guayanes River, and sorted through endless heaps of felled branches, boulders, pieces of homes, and panels of corrugated zinc. Within days, the heavy, repugnant stench of death had saturated the air. Mosquitoes, rats, and cockroaches, abounded, while the coqui tree frog's evening melody sounded muted. After another day of fruitless searching, Marco approached the khaki tent he shared with Mama and Julia, one of a sea of canvas shelters the National Guard had set up for survivors. He wore black wool pants, some Americans' idea of what was needed on the island, and the scratchy fabric irritated his skin and made him sweat. How long would they have to live like this? Without Papa's earnings, they had no funds to build a new home, no promise of an income large enough to afford a mortgage. Would they be reduced to living in a mountain shack like destitute jibaros? His throat closed and his eyes pooled. He shook his head no. He wouldn't succumb to his grief. He was the man of that family now, and he'd be strong for Mama and Julia. He promised Papa he'd take care of them. It was up to him to improve their circumstances, to protect his family from ever again having to endure such a crisis. Marco made a vow. He'd dedicate his life to improving the circumstances of his people. Next time, his family would have a solid and modern home. Next time, Puerto Rico would be prepared. So now we fast forward to 60 years after the story actually ends, and we meet up with Luis, who is Marco's son. And this is called the Hurricane 2017. Luis Rios flicked the light switch as he'd done every morning since Maria had pounded his island 7 days ago. Still no electricity. He held his breath as he relieved himself in the large jug he'd been using for that purpose. But the acrid stench of stale urine still hit his nostrils with prickly force. His 79-year-old bones ached, and his mind reeled at facing another day of no communication with the outside world. He'd been stuck in this 10th floor apartment because he knew he could make it down the stairs, but no way could he climb back up. And where would he go? WKJB's reports, the only station he could get, were clear. The island was devastated. He sat on the spacious balcony and turned on the radio. Thank God he had an ample supply of batteries. His parents had taught him how to prepare for a hurricane, and he'd weathered a few, but none like this. He'd filled the bathtubs and any available vessel with water, had stocked up on canned foods, and gotten diesel gas for the generator, which he used sparingly and only in the evenings. Despite entreaties from his children to evacuate, he'd insisted on weathering the storm in his apartment, where he could see the ocean from every window. They were all in the States, his 3 kids, surely worried sick about him, but phone lines were down, as were cell phone towers. He was completely incomunicado. Evacuate, ha! What was he going to do, sleep in a cot in the Roberto Clemente Coliseum? No, thank you. He turned the radio up, girding himself to listen to the desperate souls calling in from the States and from pockets on the island with cell service. They begged for news about missing relatives, for rescue, for water, for food. Their helplessness and his inability to come to their aid ate at his core. He'd been lucky. He'd stayed in his apartment knowing the building would protect him. His father had constructed it, Solimar's first high-rise in Condado, and named it Solimar, after the company he'd founded. Luis had forged a career at Solimar alongside his brother Miguel, but none of their children had been interested in continuing that legacy. They'd studied in American colleges and scattered to the winds. Miguel had died a decade ago, and sometimes Luis wished he had as well. Pain pierced his soul when he let himself think about his island's financial and now physical destruction. Papi had been so excited when Puerto Rico became a Commonwealth of the United States. Mommy not so much, but the two grew to tolerate each other's opinions. Muñoz's Operation Bootstrap brought hundreds of American companies to the island through the 1970s, much to his father's delight. Luis was glad Papi had lived to see modernization and prosperity reign during those decades, and thankful he died in the late 80s without witnessing the aftermath. Because when the incentives ran out, the Americans packed up with zero remorse, creating an unemployment crisis and a significant tax shortfall. Seeing that would have killed Papi. All his dreams turned to rubble. The government's brilliant idea, instead of adjusting the budget, had been to issue bonds. They borrowed money from Wall Street, and when they couldn't pay it back, the banks allowed them to borrow more. Maria had hit an island with a debt of $74 billion and an infrastructure in ruins. The Americans, in whom Papi had held such faith, had abandoned them decades ago. According to the news, they weren't stepping out to help either. At least he lived in the city. There was destruction, but not obliteration, as reports from out on the island indicated. The beautiful mountain towns hadn't fared well. So many houses destroyed, so many lives lost. Thank God for the Puerto Rican spirit. His only neighbor on this floor had fled to Florida before the storm, but he'd had visits from several friends on other floors, making sure he was okay. They'd also enjoyed a few community meals, pooling their resources for the benefit of all. None had heard from the outside world, except by radio broadcast. One had trekked to Supermax, only to find empty shelves. Luis opened a can of Campbell's chunky beef soup and ate it cold. He peered out the balcony toward Washington Street, which was no longer flooded. The road was still a minefield of debris, Yet every so often, a car would venture down, likely relatives checking on loved ones. He and his neighbors wondered when the Americans would arrive. Where was the help? The delay wouldn't have surprised Mommy, but Poppy would have been beside himself. Would any state be in such dire straits an entire week after a natural disaster? Weren't they United States citizens? Surely it was only a matter of time. He needed now for Poppy to have been right. So he sat on his balcony and waited. That's it.
Thank you so much, Margarita. I think this, just the readings that you gave today really show us that even though world building is not something that people often think about as being relevant to like real world fiction, just the visuals and the feelings and the sensations that you gave us through this reading was really just excellent. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm. So at this time, we do have about 10 minutes for our audience Q&A. So if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type that in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. And that includes authors. If you want to ask each other anything, feel free to put that in the chat as well. I have already received a couple questions. I'll start with this one. The theme of this event is social commentary, and each of your novels have some kind of social commentary to some degree, even though they're all set in times different from the current day. So are you, or did you set out to write a novel to communicate a particular message, or did that just come about naturally with the setting that you were working with? Maybe Mo, if you want to start us off with this one.
Sure. I have to say that my story always begins with characters. And as I got to know the characters and their when they lived and the dire circumstances in which they lived, I became more and more aware of the issues of the day. And I became more aware of my own feelings about those issues. And so those became threaded into the story. So that's kind of part of my process.
Yeah, totally. It's a very organic way for that to come about. Makes total sense. David, I know you talked a little bit about this right after and before your reading. So tell us a little bit more. Did the idea to communicate social message come before you were writing?
I actually just wanted to try to do something positive while I was retired. And so, just on TV right now, all the big CEOs of all the tech firms just met with Congress about we might need something called light regulation of AI. And my theme in my novels is climate change will weaken us and cause chaos. Has anybody thought about what it's going to cost to move Washington, D.C. or Manhattan? Or London, believe it or not, the Thames River is going to backfill and half of London's going to be underwater. So you have all that going on, and then you have AI. And so my whole novel thing is AI takes over everything. And we have robots running around, and then they don't care if it's 150 degrees. They don't actually need water for anything. Okay? And so they're better suited to live on Earth. And how are we going to survive? And so that's my novel series. I'm trying to write on that theme. My downfall is marketing. I have no concept how to market. I just read a little article the other day of an independent author like us. She spent $68,000 on marketing and she got no increase in web traffic and no increase in sales. Well, see, I haven't spent that money, but I need a publicist. I need marketing. That's what I need.
Right. Well, definitely it sounds like when it comes to, the writing process, it was kind of a back and forth with yourself as you were going through that. So I just also want to hear from Margarita. Was a social message something that you went into the book wanting to communicate, or did it come about naturally through the process of writing?
It did come about naturally. I set out to tell the story of my grandparents. I thought it was just a lovely little love story, and I wanted to paint a picture of old time Puerto Rico, but also educate a little bit about its history. And as I did the research for this book, I really got an education. And it so happened that I opened the book with a hurricane, and then Maria happened. So I said, well, I have to close the book with a hurricane as well. So the book really became more about Puerto Rico as a colony of the United States, and that's really kind of like the theme going through, and what um the two characters have different opinions on.
Yeah, totally. So it sounds like, we're all writing about human issues. So of course, these things sort of come about naturally as you're going through that process. We actually have kind of a similar question since you actually just mentioned that, Margarita. An anonymous question says, how did you research for your books? And since you just mentioned that, Margarita, I'd love for you to start off with this.
Well, part of my research was listening to my grandparents. So, I had the basis of the story, but yes, I had to go back into old newspaper archives and a lot of history books, and I interviewed a lot of people, and also contacted a lot of academics who love to talk about their specialty and their work, and little details like, did people eat popcorn at the movies in 1938 in Puerto Rico? Actually somebody knows the answer to that question. So yeah, I mean, for historical fiction, it's all about the research, really.
Yeah, definitely, especially firsthand reports like you just mentioned. Speaking of historical fiction research, Mo, if you could tell us a little bit about your research process for the book.
Well, I set my story in Cornwall, and I happen to have two friends from Cornwall, one who still lives there, one who lives here, and both are historians. And one's in this room right now, Richard Hoskin. But they turned me on to some books that would be helpful for me to read, which I did. I've seen a lot of films about Tudor era, but it's always the high court, off with their heads and wearing. And I was wondering what was going on with the other people. And so I read quite a few books. And, I talked with people, including my friends from Cornwall. But then also I discovered Google is really great, because if you want to find out if they were eating popcorn in the Tudor era, you can go on Google and find out. And now I found out something even better. You can ask Alexa, what king followed so-and-so? I had temporarily lost track of who came. There's a lineup after Henry VIII, and you always think Henry VIII and then you think Elizabeth, but there's others in there. So I was forgetting the lineup a little bit. So I just tried it out. I asked Alexa, and sure enough, she came up with all this history. So I didn't know that. So now, in addition to Google, I have that. But I like to read books about the era. It's funny, you don't want to be wrong about the history, but you can't let that. I don't think you can let that totally hang you up, so that it stops you. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a testament to how much, information we have access to, and then how do you actually use it? In this case, of course, creating a very real world or experience in this book. Looking in the opposite direction toward the future, David, clearly a lot of research went into your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Well, I constantly, I'm very interested in technology in all of its forms. So I read articles. I'm on, with the advantage of the web, I am on all these web pages where I read articles on electrical vehicles, on all kinds of technology, genetics, and a lot of things. So, and I have loved astronomy. I should have been an astronomer, is what I should have done. But in science fiction, in the future, you don't have, you have to be 70–80% technically correct. If you're not, your readers are not going to be happy with you. So I try to be 70–80% technically correct. I've got a fourth book where there's something about this planet that is very weird about this planet in the fourth novel. And I've spent 200 or 300 hours researching, can a planet be that way? And I find it interesting personally, in addition to it'll help me write the fourth book. So with my kind of stuff, if you're 70–80% technically sound, your readers will go along with the rest.
Yeah, I can definitely think of a lot of research rabbit holes I've gone down. I can only imagine when you get this far into it, you got to do something with all that knowledge.
Oh, I don't know how much, 20–30% of my time is wasted. Research time is wasted. You know, you go down a rabbit hole and there's nothing there.
Right. So kind of parsing out the right knowledge. Well, I just want to say to our authors, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was so wonderful to hear your books in the voices of their own creators. So thank you to Mo, to David, and to Margarita for being generous with your time, your words, your thoughts today. And of course, thank you to everyone in the audience for being here with us as we celebrate these wonderful authors. Don't forget that you can order the Lost Books, Earth's Ecocide, Desperation 2647, and A Delicate Marriage from the links in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. Otherwise, we'll look forward to hearing from you, and that's it. So have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Hala. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.